another episode of Superhero Sitters, pet sitters opening up about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happy pets. My name is Joshua Carey, co-founder of the APSE, and in this series, we follow professional pet sitters who have stories to share that may sound heroic, but were really all carried out without a second thought, and as we'll hear, all part of a day's work. In today's program, we're joined by Gus Elfving. He is the principal and pack leader of Pet Peeps in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us, Gus.
Hello, Josh. Thanks for having me.
So let's begin with a snapshot of you and your business. How did you first find yourself in pet sitting?
That's a good question. By accident. I had moved to D.C. to finish my degree at American University. As an undergrad, had interned on the Hill. After a while, that kind of wears on you, and I started looking at other avenues. As it turned out, I had dated somebody who was doing overnights at a boarding facility, and I did overnights with them. After that, a friend of mine was leaving a dog walking gig, and I took that on. The part-time job that I was working as retail, like they called me up and said, "Hey, you haven't worked in 2 months. Do you still work here?" And I was like, getting all my shifts covered, hadn't really been there, and I realized at that point, I can really, I guess all of my hard work and diligence paid off. I was able to actually support myself at taking care of other people's pets, and I, continued to dedicate myself to actually at that point to growing a business.
How many years now have you been in business?
Officially, I started Pet Peeps in 2006.
Great. Now, I spent the majority of my life on the East Coast, so I personally know how brutal the snowstorms can be. Tell us your story that I know you call Snowpocalypse.
I thought Snowmageddon was much better and more appropriate. Snowpocalypse was an ungodly amount of snow. We got about over 2 feet of snow in early February of last year, and it basically shut the city down. Where I had a client who had been a long-time client for us. They have a cat named Sausage, and we always enjoy taking care of Sausage. So the client had to be out of town for a wedding, and they had reached out to friends, and they weren't getting any response from any of their friends, and they needed care for Sausage and a feral cat rescue who had recently undergone surgery, who was also staying with the family while they went out of town. As this huge snowstorm is approaching, they realize that they're going to have to leave early if they're going to get to this wedding that's out of town in order to, avoid not being able to go. They need to leave Friday morning. They haven't heard anything back from anybody on Thursday. They call me in a panic, and we were able to arrange to care for Sausage on the fly so that they could, leave that morning. The next morning when we were supposed to go, over 2 feet of snow had fallen, so I was, determined that we were going to get there. There was so much snow on the ground that they had actually shut down all of the bus lines. There weren't any cabs out. So, I put on my boots and my coat, and I kind of trudged through 2 feet plus of snow to get over a mile to get to their house, and took care of Sausage, and began to try and tend to Sheba, who was the alley cat rescue, who had recently undergone surgery on her hindquarters. And I peer into the crate, and I can see that her food and water need freshened, and that she obviously her litter box needs tended. And she looks so sad and adorable and so sweet, and just really droopy. So I start to open up the cage and take care of her food and water, and all of a sudden, this cat leaps out of the crate and jumps up onto the chair, and then from the chair up to the door to the outside, and there's a window above the door transom. She tries to jump into the transom, hits the door, comes sliding down to the floor with a thud, gets up without missing a beat, jumps onto the table, tries to make exits for the door into the dining room. Luckily, I had slid the pocket door shut into the dining room before I had come into the kitchen. She again hits the door. She runs over onto the counter, jumps on the counter. Coupons and like things are flying off the counter. She jumps from the island to the kitchen counter, like utensils and kitchen appliance, like little tiny kitchen appliances are flying all over the kitchen. She jumps up onto the refrigerator. All of the cereal boxes like fly off the refrigerator, and she starts trying to wedge herself between the wall and the refrigerator.
Oh, no.
And the only thing I can see is her poor little behind with the incision from the surgery sticking out, and I am scared to death to touch it. So I've been trying to calm her down the whole time that all of this is going on and trying to shush her and calm her. Of course, it's to no avail. And so there I am with Sheba, like, trying to crawl behind the refrigerator and, all this mess of all this stuff all over the kitchen.
And this is a cat that was healing from surgery, and anything could now happen to this wound that desperately needs to heal.
Yeah, it's a feral cat who's recovering from surgery, who, like, just moments ago looked like they couldn't have gotten up off the ground on their own accord, who is now crazily jumping all over the place. I was afraid to grab the rear of the cat where the incision was for fear of, like, breaking the incision open or the stitches popping, and then having a situation on my hands where I couldn't get the cat to the emergency pet hospital if it was even open.
Wow. So what wound up happening with you and Sheba?
Well, luckily I had no plug for the Red Cross here, but luckily I had done my fair share of, like, emergency pet care training, emergency pet first aid, and I remember with a cat, one of the things to do is to grab a towel, or in some cases a pillowcase. I found a kitchen towel. This was all within seconds. I was able to grab the towel, gingerly wrap it around the rear of Sheba. I'm able to wrap her up, sort of like a swaddling baby, in this towel and hold on to her as I finish changing the food, the water, and the litter, and deposit her back into the crate safely and soundly.
So your professional training allowed you to stay calm and react appropriately to the situation. So I imagine to the untrained person in this situation where this poor little cat who is trying to recover from surgery, for whatever reason, sees the opening, freaks out, jumps out, may have found themselves in a different situation. And I have to remind our listeners that all this is in a complete snowstorm that basically shut down the city. So if something happened to this cat, who knows what could have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest with you, I wasn't quite fully prepared enough for the situation going in, knowing that I was dealing with a feral cat. I knew that it was a cat, it was an outdoor cat. I didn't realize that it was as feral as it was. And so I really was, I think, lucky in the situation that I had some training and that it had stuck with me, because in the situation, all that story, I've probably taken longer telling the story, 10 times as long telling the story, as all the split seconds that this whole situation took place. And it was sort of in the middle of a storm. And so, like, that's in the back of my head, like, freaking out, like, what happens? What happens? Luckily, I didn't have to find out.
When you finally get to speak to the client and let her know what happened, I could imagine she was just thankful for your professionalism.
Oh, she was actually more than thankful for my professionalism, which she was. She was professional and very grateful for the fact that we had even made it to the house. Because, as I had said, the city, they had tried to reach out to neighbors and people who typically help them with the cat. They realized fully well, because they weren't able to get back into town themselves, that the city had shut down. I think more than anything, they were just grateful that we had actually agreed to do it and that we were able to make it there. They were so happy and pleased as punch that, given the situation and the circumstances, that Sheba had recuperated more fully than they had anticipated. That I was able to handle myself and to handle the incident without anything happening to make it worse. After that whole crazy circus with Sheba went down, I tidied up everything, put all the cereal boxes back, and I, washed all the dishes that had fallen down on the ground, tidied up.
I want to thank you, Gus, for taking the time and sharing this story with us. And it's just another insight into the great need to do your research when hiring a pet sitter, someone to care for your pets, to make sure they have the skills, the training, and the professionalism to do the job, and really to handle any foreseen or unforeseen circumstances. And it seemed like you, Gus, handled it like a pro. And again, I want to thank you for sharing the story with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening to my crazy story.